I wanted to begin this conversation concerning culture killers because most individuals who are trying to build anything great, they build it from the offensive, not the defensive. As a sports guy, I normally spend time focusing on not just the teams that have popular players, but the teams that can possibly create dynasties. And what I've discovered is for them to be as great as they've been intended to be, they must not only maximize offensive opportunities, but they must be strong concerning defense as well. It is an amazing thing that when we think of trying to accomplish anything for God, that we don't take into consideration how we would be fought concerning our efforts and our opportunities. I wonder if people would really reconsider the fact that if this is not something that's just average or something that's just good, but it's something that's great, I wish they would consider they're going to be greatly fought concerning, again, those opportunities and those efforts. So I wanted to have this conversation with you and yours because I don't want anything to kill your culture. I want what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to build, what you're putting your hands to, what you are investing thousands and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars into this project. Many individuals, they sacrifice everything for something to attempt to possibly get back their return, if not everything, as a result of, again, their investments. And so let's jump in and have this conversation concerning culture killers, because I think quite possibly you're going to reconsider some things that you may not have paid attention to, or it's going to confirm that you're right on schedule with those things that you are sensing concerning what it is that you are building. We can't have this conversation concerning culture killers until we properly define what culture is. And what I've discovered is that culture can be best defined as all the ways of life, including arts, beliefs, and institutions of population that are passed down from generation to generation. This definition is important because if this is a solid culture, a way of doing things, this should be passed from one generation to the next, and then so on. I think there's some things that we don't consider as we're building. Sometimes we over spiritualize these things and we don't consider how practical some of these subject matters are. Let me give you the first point. I need you to understand that people carry spirits. This spirit is attitude, mood, and response. And while we are quick to say the devil did it, or the devil came against my project, or we are in warfare or under attack, I need you to understand that the adversary did not just show up, but somebody brought it. What I don't care if it's in that organization or in that choir, I don't care if it's in that team or in that family. Somebody had to harbor this fugitive or this adversary to bring him in something that was safe, something that was sacred, and something that was sanctified. When I use that word sanctified, I mean set apart. It was set apart for something special, and somebody contaminated it. Here's the reality. Most of the people who come in to alter our culture, they don't look like an enemy. They don't look like a threat. They don't look like an adversary. Oftentimes, they can be someone who has your heart. They can be someone who has your last name or somebody who has influence, whether that's financial, whether that's relational. And so, because they bring so much to the table, sometimes we can ignore the fact that they're the reason why things have changed in such a drastic manner. We've got to know, again, number one, people carry spirits, but then we also have to consider personality types. And let me say this, especially when I talk to church people concerning this matter. We think that everybody is the same, but Christianity is not one size fits all as far as personality. Yes, we have the same father, but he understands that he doesn't have the same children. People bring personality types, and I'm going to share a cuss word with you that I want you to strongly consider. without being offended. Here's the cuss word. The cuss word is horoscope. I say that because growing up in a traditional family, a Christian family, I believe that horoscopes were of the devil. That's what we believe. That if you said you were a Sagittarius, a Cancer, a Leo, if you were a Virgo, if you were any of these things, you had to be satanic, you had to be demonic, and all of that. But one day, I went into Barnes and Nobles when I lived in Portland, Oregon, and when I walked into Barnes and Noble, somebody told me to look at a book that had my horoscope in it. When I looked at it, I saw some very valid information and content in there to the point to where it scared me so much. I dropped the book and I ran out the store because while it gave me so much truth and clarity, it also offended what I have been taught in previous moments, places, and spaces that this was the devil. The reason why I bring this up for culture killers is because there are times when you are putting personality types in the same room and you're wondering why they don't get along. They can be the same age, they can be the same color, they can have some of the same beliefs, they can have some of the same trainings, and you wonder why is it that they clash the way they clash. I want you not again to believe in horoscopes. That's not what I'm saying. All I want you to do is consider the fact that while we may be saved, while we may all want to make money, while we all want to be productive at the same time, again, we're putting different personality types in a room on a project. We're telling them to join a cause. And while we want to accomplish something to a great degree, have we really considered the personality types we put in the room? How do you measure that? How do you look at the fact that this person is highly opinionated while this person is passive? This person is extremely territorial while this person is a leader. And so no matter how much you try to mediate while they have so much going on concerning their spiritual walk or whatever the case may be, there's still some internal things that they deal with Monday through Saturday that has now formed their personality. This is why we have to consider the world that people see from and even hear from. That's their paradigm. Their paradigm is simply their worldview. Their worldview is built from three things: it's built from education, it's built from association, and it's built from socialization. It's built from education. That's how they learn or who's teaching them. So when a person has taught them that if a person challenges you, they're against you, or if a person doesn't see things eye to eye with you, then they must not be in your favor. They are coming to the table with that worldview concerning education. Again, how they're learning and who taught them. And then associations, who they've been connected to. If they have been connected to healthy people, they respond in healthy ways. If they respond to people who are unhealthy, they respond in unhealthy ways. And so, again, you are a new individual who have shown up in their lives, and you've shown up in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And because you showed up that day, you thought because they read the agenda and agreed to it, they read the job description and agreed to it, or they left that meeting and got excited and agreed to it, that you believed that they were going to be all in. But because of education and association, you have a project that possibly you haven't even considered. I told you it's three things: it's education, it's association, and then socialization. The atmospheres they have been in. Have they been in atmospheres bigger than their living room to challenge them to think bigger than themselves? Have they been around atmospheres of excellence or atmospheres to where there was a leader or there was possibly a woman in authority or there was someone younger than them that was actually the leader above them? We got to consider socialization. What atmospheres have they been in? What have they been exposed to prior to joining our church, being a part of our team, or quite possibly joining our cause? We've got to consider that. Then we've got to consider patterns. What keeps following you. I say this often and it sounds comical, but it's so true that if mess always follows you, check your shoes. That means that there are some patterns, and people say, this always happens to me. People always say this about me. Every time I enter this, this happens. And I want to say, if there is a pattern, please take time to consider why this is happening, because quite possibly, I know this is hard for you to consider, but quite possibly, it could be you. We've got to consider people carry spirits. We've got to consider personality types. We've got to consider patterns. But then we got to consider problem solving techniques. How do the people on our team, how do they solve problems? Some people solve problems by yelling and screaming. Some people solve problems by physical abuse, by lashing out, by fighting. Some people solve problems by quitting. They just leave. Then there are other individuals that solve problems by shutting down. They just get quiet and you don't get anything out of them. And then other individuals, they don't fight at all. They just keep going and act like a thing doesn't exist. When a person is used to solving problems in a particular way that may not be healthy, while you have given them a job description or you have an expectation concerning them, I want to tell you again, this person has brought decades of experience to say, this is how I do it, and this is how I'm most comfortable expressing myself as it relates to problem solving. This is why you got to consider who you put in leadership. If this person is an extremely territorial person, you've got to consider that. If this is a person that doesn't have a filter and just says everything that comes to mind, you've got to consider that. If this is a person that drops things when they don't get their way and they take their ball and go home, you've got to consider that when you're trying to build and help an individual help you accomplish what's been intended to be accomplished. So again, you got to consider people, personality types, patterns, problem solving techniques. And then here's a hard one. I need you to take a deep breath and hear this one. You've got to consider prejudices. And when we talk about being prejudiced, we normally go straight to black and white. But I want to go on record by saying we all have our prejudices. We all have how we've been taught, again, our paradigm, our education, association, and socialization. We have our prejudices. When I was growing up in church, we were traditional Baptists, and some of my friends were Pentecostal, and we believed that the Pentecostals were holier than thou, and then the Pentecostals believed that we didn't have a standard and we were going to hell. And of course, we learned that we were very similar in our struggles, although we were different concerning our worship, but based on our prejudices, we had to have conversations to work through those things that we brought to the table. And so I want you to consider some of these prejudices that you may not have considered before. Prejudices concerning authority. I'll listen to them, but they have to be this, or I'm not used to being under authority. I'm used to doing what I do, how I do it, and nobody tells me anything. I'm the youngest in my family, but I run my family. My mother needs me. My father hasn't been there, and so this is what I bring to the table. You have to consider that prejudice of authority. Then you got to consider that prejudice concerning gender. Quite possibly they have an issue with female leadership or authority or male authority. You've got to consider gender. You got to consider age. If they're too old, they don't know what's best. Or if they're younger than me, what can they tell me? I'm old enough to be their parent or their grandparent. Yet this person is in authority. But hear me, you're being challenged because this person is on your team with a prejudice concerning age. You got to consider titles. That concerning titles, they can believe that title means something that you don't even function in. Let me say it this way. I remember we were getting ready to make a bishop, and this bishop church, their concern was that they were going to lose their bishop when they got elevated. Now, that was never a concern of mine, but they came to the table with an issue that I never considered. Once we end up challenging and tackling that issue, then everything was good, everything worked out smooth, and everything was in order. But I never considered that that was a prejudice that they came to the table with because they were used to seeing titles used a particular way. And that was not the way that we intended. Maybe that's what you're dealing with on your staff and with your team. When they hear that title in their mind, they think of somebody who could have possibly mismanaged that particular title before. And now you're challenged with something you've never considered. Here's another one: financial status. That they'll say, if you ain't doing better than me, how can you tell me anything? They respond to people that seem to have money, or people who are flashy, or people who can pay them. This is why Judas betrays Jesus. This is why Delilah betrays Samson. It is these things where they respond to money. More than likely, these are people who are now dealing with self ambition. And so they're about themselves, and they only attach themselves to people who can do things for them instead of understanding the greater cause, which is why they're on the team in the first place. These are things that you have to consider as, again, you're putting people in a room. You're challenging them to build this choir, to build this leadership team, to build this staff, to help build this organization, to build this department. I want you to consider these areas. Consider the fact all these people are potential people to bring in spirits to come in rather, and attack your culture. I want you to consider their personality types, their patterns, certain things that have happened over the years. This is why normally when people get hired, they want references so that they can see the pattern. If they've been at a job only a year and a half and always switch, you're able to see the pattern. All of these things are worth considering. Their problem techniques. Ask them, how do you normally respond? More than likely, you won't always get an honest answer, but it is something you must pay attention to if you're trying to build a culture. Then you got to consider these prejudices as you are building what you're building. And I need you to know what you're building is something so significant that it's going to blow your mind when you even get to the halfway point, not just get to the finish line. But many people, they struggle because no church can be greater than God wants them to be. But many churches are not as great as God has intended them to be. That's what Dr. R.A. Vernon said. And I believe that applies to you and yours. So let's look at these 6 things that can alter your future efforts. These are 6 culture killers. And I want to have this in-depth discussion. And with this discussion, I want you, before you to consider them, I want you to consider you. Number 1, self-ambition. Self-ambition is when the desire to promote yourself overrides the values of the organization or the team. This is when I walk in and all I'm concerned about is how this benefits me. I don't care who I throw under the bus. I don't care who I insult because it's about me. I don't want any of the blame, but I do want all of the credit. You've got to consider self-ambition. This is one of the things that happens in the life of David. One of his sons ended up offending one of his other sons, and as it relates to Tamar. And with this, the son was distant, but yet there was a moment of reconciliation and restoration that came, and David brought him back to the fold. But when the son came back, Absalom came back. Absalom was not repentant. Absalom still had self ambition as a priority. So he would use his relationship with David to undermine David, and David had no awareness of it. Why? Because nobody believed, number one, David even saw what Absalom was doing. Then people were afraid because they saw how David catered to him, how David was happy he returned. This is why you've got to be careful who you display as your favorites. because people will believe that if they say anything against them, that they're going to be in trouble with you. And so, as it relates to your family or who you're in relationship with or who you call friend, they look at that and all that can alter the relationships of those other individuals that are around. So, with self ambition, while Absalom should have been grateful that he was restored, he used his own desires to be able to get him attention and to get him affirmation from a team that wasn't his. Who on your team is so headstrong that when they are not the center of attention, they can't function? When they're not the one highlighted, they're out of rhythm. You can see that when they're corrected, they take it too far. And although you can say it in love, you can say it in a kind manner, to them, what they're saying is, you're shutting down my agenda, and all you're trying to do is hinder an opportunity for the sake of them growing in a healthy manner. But because they're not repentant, because they're functioning in self ambition, they can't receive. This is a dominant trait that hinders teams' cultures, because we believe that there is no I in team. And I heard someone say this years ago. They said there's no I in team, but there is an M and an E. These individuals function with self ambition, and they can hinder your team from accomplishing what they need to accomplish. Secondly, offense. Offense. And it believes in Matthew chapter 17, it says it's impossible for offenses to not come, but woe unto he who offends. What does that mean? You're going to get offended. Why? Because somebody is different than you. Somebody dropped the ball. Somebody erred. Somebody missed it. Somebody just had a bad day. All of these things show up. Somebody quit, and now your workload was greater. You wanted to take off, but you couldn't take off. Someone disagreed with something that you had your heart in, and now you're offended. And offense can hinder teams from accomplishing what they need to accomplish. Here's the danger: the danger is not just that they will be offended, but the danger is how they respond to that offense. Some people, when they're offended again, they express themselves differently. They lash out, they shut down, they quit. Very seldom do you find individuals who are able to continue, not just continue their responsibilities, but keep the same energy, keep the same attitude, even after offense. Normally, it's because we never take time to address it. We never take time to have mature conversation. We just either again, we lash out and we go off, or we shut down and we never address it and deal with it. But I want you to keep an open door policy concerning offense so that people can communicate when necessary. Now, while that sounds simple and we say these are grown people, they should know that they should be able to talk it out, or these are spiritual people. They know what they should do and how they do it. I want to tell you, it doesn't always happen like that. So you want to make sure that you look at offenses. And there are sometimes when leaders have to step in and say, even though they're not considering this as a big deal, they're not taking it serious, I have to, because it can alter the culture of my team and my organization. Number three, gossip can. And I know people will say, I don't gossip, or we have healthy gossip. But gossip can hinder the team when you find yourself talking more about people than you're talking to them. Normally, when a person is gossiping, they're trying to sway the person that they're talking to in a particular direction. So, what they're doing is normally trying to either make themselves look better than the individual, or trying to make the individual look smaller than they really need to be. So you got to consider gossip. How are we building each other? Are we using language? Are we using our mouths to edify, to make the team better, to make other people better? Or are we spending more time belittling or devaluing people, whether they deserve it or not? Sometimes people believe that gossip is spreading negative things about an individual that may not be true. But sometimes, even if it is true, we still need to be careful at what we say and what we do because it can hinder individuals from being able to grow. And this is one thing I discovered about gossip. Sometimes people will participate in gossip with you to learn the particular things that you're trying to share, but they'll look at you differently because they will say, if they say this about everyone else outside of my presence, they're probably saying it about me. I want you to consider those individuals who gossip because people who are strong in gossip, they're strong culture killers. And I know you may not see it that way, but trust me, that's one of the major things that can hinder your team's culture. You also got to consider familiarity. That when people come again, when they come from areas or they come from families or environments where their paradigm is not used to authority or leadership that's different than the lens they believe a father or a mother is somebody much older than them. So if that doesn't fit who you are, they struggle, or again, their gender, whatever the case may be. One of the challenges is when they can't respect you, they get familiar with you. And I want to go on record by saying this, just because they like you don't mean they respect you. Here's the dangerous thing when you start being common with people who you lead, that many times, as long as they like you and you're in agreement, everything goes smooth. But if something happens and they no longer agree, they will use their moments of familiarity, those things that they've learned, those things, those private things that they may have seen, or even moments of imperfection. They will begin using them against you, or even in moments of correction when the team is supposed to grow, when the team is supposed to expand, when the team is supposed to evolve or ultimately change, they're going to believe you were talking to everybody else in the room but them. There's a restaurant that I go to frequently. And just a few weeks ago, one of my favorite waiters, they got fired from their job. They got fired, and all I know with the years of going there, over a decade of going to this restaurant, I'm used to this individual being present. For them to get fired, it shook the entire company and those regulars that came in. I wanted to ask what happened to cause them to get fired. And what I was told was this person was in meeting after meeting to address a particular issue. And they decided that they were talking to everyone else but them, made the same mistake on camera, and it cost them a job they worked over a decade. There are individuals on your staff, again, because of familiarity. They say, okay, I heard what you said, but you were talking to them. You can't be talking to me. These are individuals that are too familiar to really help you grow. They are so stuck in what they believe and how they think that they have become a culture killer. And you got to contend with that personality trait before it kills those things that you're trying to build. Then preference. And yes, we all have preferences. We have a preference of our favorite food. We have a preference over our favorite seasons. We have preferences over the style of music that we enjoy. We have preferences of what city we prefer to vacation in. We all have our preferences. But what I've discovered is if you want to accomplish anything great, you must be willing to sacrifice your preference for purpose. Yes, I have a preference. If you ask me what I would want, I know what I would want. I know if I would prefer to go left instead of going right. I have a preference. But with that preference, if I am immature, if I do not go the direction of my purpose, I'm not going to give you all of me nor operate as my best self. But when I'm mature, even if the directive doesn't match my preference, I'm still able to give my total self to a decision that would not have been one I decided because I believe that the purpose is greater than my preference. This is when I've got to trust leadership. This is when I've got to buy into the overall goal of the team. And even though I didn't get my way, it's not about me. It is about what all of us can accomplish. So I've got to be willing, once again, to sacrifice my preference for the sake of purpose. Then we got to deal with pride. One of the things that my favorite book says is that God resists the proud. When we come and we are arrogant, when we are individuals who can't be adjusted, can't be corrected, can't apologize, when we are individuals that have to appear to be better than everyone else, and even when our mouth is quiet, our spirit is still loud. These are individuals who operate in pride. I'm telling you that because God resists the proud, I want to challenge you to resist them as well. When they bring that to the table and they're unwilling to sacrifice for the greater good of everyone else, when they're unwilling to make adjustments concerning sometimes dress code, sometimes concerning their conversation, who they click with, or what they prefer, when they're unwilling to do that, what they're doing is displaying pride to you. And when they do that, I want you to put them on the hot seat. Yes, give them an opportunity to change. But when there is no change, this person must be removed because they are the number one target that the enemy will use to kill your team's culture. I want you to look at these six. And I believe that if we look at these six and we look at them, first of all, internal, and then look at them external, we will be able to properly evaluate what could kill our culture. Now, we'll talk at a later time as far as what can build your culture. But again, what you're trying to accomplish is something generational. It is something that's supposed to be purposeful, but then it's a portal for resources. And we want to make sure that we're able to build something that outlives us. I believe that every vision is supposed to be greater than the visionary. And you have something special, but let's not let it die because we didn't do our due diligence. Let's make sure we consider these things because, again, for you and yours, the best is yet to come.